www.offthecorner.net. You're watching the Fact Project, and FACT, of course, is an acronym that stands for Fundamental African-Centered Thought. The goal here on the Fact Project is to convey some thoughts and some information to members of our community. We have joining us today activist, Pan-Africanist, Garveyite, author, Brother Senghor Baye. Peace, Brother Senghor. Thank you for joining us today, brother.
Good. Can you hear me all right?
I can hear you well, brother. Yes.
Yeah. How you doing, brother? You know, I say Bubiphobia and Baragani and Hetep, Hotep, Alafia, and what's happening?
Yes, brother. I'm okay. And Baba Mosi is with us. Peace, Baba Mosi. How you doing today, brother?
Peace. Great. Good to see you.
It's good seeing you, brother. I was trying to have you come back. Yeah, I was trying to have you come back on in August, but you had left the country and you didn't have internet connection where you were, so we didn't make it happen. So we're grateful to see you back back on today. I'm bringing both of you brothers on here to talk about Ibrahim Traore. There's been a lot said about him in recent memory. I want to kind of lay out some of the things that he achieved, because I feel like when we have the conversation, we're not totally having the full conversation. And there are a lot of things that are being missed and skipped over. So I want to get into some of those things today. I'm going to see if I can share my screen really quick so we can give people a little bit of a background on exactly who it is we're talking about, so that everybody is up to speed and we're on the same page, so everybody knows what we're saying. So here we go. And I have here a bio. This is coming from AI. And I'm going to say to both of you brothers, I think AI should really stand for actually incorrect, because sometimes the information is not that accurate. but I'm going to go ahead. Say that again.
I said that's interesting. That's what your description.
Yeah, well, we're gonna put some blacktricity in it too. We're gonna definitely talk about AI from the African-centered perspective, which is ancestral intelligence.
There you go. Okay, so now it says Ibrahim Traore is a Burkinabe politician, a military officer who currently serves as president of Burkina Faso. So far, so good. He assumed office on October 6, 2022, after leading a coup that removed his predecessor, Paul Henry Sadago.
Damiba is, Damiba, just the other names are kind of, Sandago, Damiba.
There you go. And at 36 years old, he's currently the second youngest state leader globally, the youngest serving president. Now, they talked about the coup. Can any one of you speak in detail about the coup? You know anything about that? The coup that took place in October of 2022?
Sure. So basically, let me be very clear. When I say ancestral intelligence, we speak it from an African-centered perspective. So it's kind of important for the listeners to understand. Yes, Brother Ibrahim Traore may be the leader of what took place, but it's actually the people who rose up collectively to take charge of their destiny. That is very important for us to recognize. In terms of Ibrahim Traore, it's taken nothing away from the great works that he's leading, but it is very important, as he would say, it's about the people. And right now, not only in the Sahel states and in the particularly Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso and the Sahel states, and some of the other Western countries, there's an uprising that's taking place all around the continent and around the world, actually, with young people around his age. I think he's now about 37, 38. But the point is, Ibrahim Traore, in my opinion, is a reincarnated, committed, conscious African youth that's emulating the continued works of Thomas Sankara. So if you look back, even before the so-called coup that took place where Ibrahim Traore took the lead, there was ongoing battles. The people actually ran out the murderer of Thomas Sankara, and there's been an ongoing fight, despite the fact that the media may not have told us, with the uprising of our people to return back to the works of Thomas Sankara. So I wanted to make it very clear, most coups that take place or have taken place on the continent have been done by imperialists, you know, when they disagree. But there are a few that have taken place that are actually led and directed by the people. That's what we experienced with Burkina Faso. Consequently, because Burkina Faso youth rose up and Thomas Sankara made a move, after that, similar issues happened in Mali and in Niger. So what we are witnessing is an uprising of young people. And the good news about Thomas Sankara is he's following, being a Muslim brother, he's following the works of our ancestors and
You
taking
mean Traore,
charge.
though?
Beg your pardon, Baba Mosi?
You mean Traore?
Yeah, Traore. That's right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, Traore. Thank you, sir. So it's kind of important for us as African people to really get into the crust of what's going on. And technically, we'll get more deeper into what's going on worldwide with African people because it's all related. And once we take charge of our own destiny, of course, the imperialists are losing ground of the continued rape of the continent. So what we are witnessing with his leadership, Traore's leadership, is a rise of young people. The good news, as I said about him, is he happens to be a very conscious and a very committed and a very humble leader. So, and there are other leaders, known and unknown, that are in the background with him in Burkina Faso. So we don't want to get caught up in the individual, how should I put it? We as African people move from a perspective of Ubuntu and Mahat that are Pan-Africanists and conscious Union Pan-Africanists. So let's be very clear. My brother is a leader and a representation of many millions of young brothers and sisters that are tired of what has been going on in terms of the rape of the continent. So that's basically what took place in terms of the so-called coup, where they took over and ran out the compradors, or those people who were aligning themselves with the stealing of the gold, the stealing of the resources, the rape and killing of the, and down oppression of the people. So that's the coup that took place in Burkina Faso. And many of us are watching because we have a history of coups that have gone in certain directions and turned around and not been in the favor of the people. We can honestly say that from what we've seen with the Sahel states, that's totally different. It's actually not just a coup, it's a revolution.
Okay, Baba Mosi, you want to add on to that?
Well, yes, Traore is a trusted. I guess today you can call him for the young people. He's a living icon, because everywhere, you know, you've had the coups in the other states, Sahel states, but it's Traore that the world is focusing on right now, and that's because he is leading in putting forward the kind of development strategy for the states, and the young people believe in him because they can see that he is honest, they can see that he's true to the cause, and they want to be part of it, and they can see also that as Baba Senghor had said earlier, that he's walking in the footsteps of Thomas Sankara. So, you know, it's definitely a situation where the young people mainly are, you know, the engine of this revolution in Burkina Faso. The Bakanabi people are true to the spirit of the actions of Sankara, and they are certainly going to make sure, because we've had coups, or attempted coups against Traoré already several times, and they have gone out in the streets to support him. In other words, they're saying, no, nobody's going to remove him. And they're sending a message to the French. We're not going to let this happen again. I mean, they're going to protect Traoré. And that's what they're doing. So, yeah.
All right.
I'll add that to it.
Nice. So now let me say this. You mentioned coups that were attempted against the brother. Do we know who was behind those coups?
Well, it's the French,
Okay.
mainly. The French government, they're missing that gold that's coming out of Burkina Faso, and they've been operating out of Ivory Coast, and so they've had their spies, and they've several times they've made attempts through Ivory Coast to bring in arms and other people, and bring in people who are out of the coast, who are actually from Burkina Faso but are living in Ivory Coast because they're against the government. And then again, you have these other rebel groups north of who are coming from, let's say, Algeria and northern Mali and places like that. So it's a lot that he has to deal with when it comes to keeping that government in place.
And I may add, after the assassination of Muammar Gaddafi and Libya, you had as Baba Mosi just said, you had a tremendous amount of rebels, unconscious folks, who were armed, who ran out of Libya into other nation states. And so you have a lot of different rebels, as Baba Mosi has said, that have been used by the French and the imperialists to take root and to make attempts to engage in a co-op or assassination, actually, of Traoré. So I just wanted to make it clear. Muammar Gaddafi, when Libya was taken down, if you look at how Libya is now, right now, it's in a terrible situation. And so a lot of the so-called armed rebels have just gone berserk, moving into other nation states. And that's very important. In addition to what Baba Mosi said, so all of them pose a threat for the ongoing revolution. And of course, their major objective is evil and payment from the colonial masters.
Okay, now I want to make sure that everybody's clear on what we're talking about. The French, along with other European powers, basically colonized different countries in Africa, and we can talk about the Berlin Conference and so forth. The French also colonized our African brothers and sisters in Haiti, and they eventually got overtaken by African people in Haiti when the African people in Haiti engaged in the revolution that culminated into their freedom in 1804. So the French and the Europeans are basically coming to Africa, stealing land, stealing the mineral wealth and resources. Not only that, forcing their culture on the people. A lot of these Francophone countries, they're actually speaking French in Africa. So they're forced to speak the colonizer's language. And so I'm showing here a map of Burkina Faso in Africa so people will understand exactly what it is we're talking about. Brother Senghor, do you have anything else you might want to say about French colonialism on the African continent?
Absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. The Francophone countries, and we need to go all the way back even to Kwame Nkrumah's days, where Sékou Touré made a first move to buck on the French or the French government. And what the French did was do everything they could to take that whole country out by pulling out everything as including light bulbs that they had put in. So what I'm saying is there's been an ongoing battle against French colonialism in all the Francophone countries. And we're witnessing that still today. There are still Francophone countries that are caught in the vice with the control of the dollar or the or what they call the franc, and all of the money that all of those countries we're accumulating has to even the money that comes to them, which is minuscule compared to what is taken out, goes back into French banks. So what you have is a capitalistic monopoly capitalism that has been taking place ever since the Berlin Conference. So not only have they been taking out resources from all of these nation states, and I prefer the word nation states rather than countries, because we weren't at the Berlin Conference. We didn't have nothing to do with carving up the continent. They did it. And they did it for reasons for taking out all the resources. And in addition to that, oppressing the people and giving a little bit of pay to the people, but also that little bit of pay that they were giving to the people had to come back into the so-called French economy. Yeah. So what has happened is cultural control of what I call monopoly capitalism that has been taking place in all the Francophone countries. And let's don't just stop there. It's with all of the European imperialists. But France cannot really survive without the resources that they've been taking out of Africa. So as the revolution takes place and we take charge of self-determination and cut them off, it's bleeding them in France.
Okay, Baba Mosi, you want to add on to that about the French?
Well, yeah, they've had a long history of brutal colonialism in Africa. They've put down a lot of military force. I mean, they have no compunction to use the military force, French military, coming into the African countries. Ivory Coast, and it was one of those that they recently. Well, we don't know exactly what's happening there right now, but they've got their hands in things there right now, because the government was overthrown, and we can't really figure out right now who is really in charge. But the French are there. They're not going to leave that easily, because as Baba Senghor said earlier, the French are nowhere without the economic resources coming out of Africa. And I think Mali, they need the material for their energy, and so without that, France will fall. And the thing is, without right now, what's happening in the States, I'm talking about the new states, the new Sahel states, is that they're getting some aid from Africa and China and other places other than France. And that is why you can see right now what's happening. The French in Ukraine, putting arms, etc., into Ukraine, it has something to do with the fact that Russia is aiding the Sahel states, especially Burkina Faso.
I was coming to that.
Yes, and they're counteracting things, in Ukraine, because they want to keep Russia busy while they're doing their thing in Africa. You see, but okay. Let's face it, the people in Africa right now, they're determined. They're determined to not have the French coming back in there dominating things. And I'm sure that with leaders like Traore and Chiani, the brothers in Mali and Burkina Faso, they're going to succeed and keep the French out.
Okay, now
that's needed.
You mentioned that Europe, and I'm going to throw China in there too, and some of these other continents cannot survive without the mineral wealth of Africa. What do you mean when you say that? Give me examples of how these other continents can't survive without the mineral wealth of Africa.
Well, France has one of the largest collections of gold, and France does not produce gold. The gold is coming out of Africa. As much as they say that some of the currencies are not attached to gold for its worth. Gold is what really and truly people are basing wealth with, or wealth on. It's gold, and so they were stealing a lot of gold out of Burkina Faso, And they now and the Burkina Faso, the mines, the gold mines, have been nationalized. So now the French don't have it anymore, and so they're in trouble for the future, and so they're mad as hell. And so what they're doing is trying to go circuitous way, destroy Russia and China, so that these two major countries in Europe, major industrial countries, cannot aid the African countries who are seeking development and who are seeking to, detach themselves from the European domination, economic domination, especially. Um, it's there's a lot of minerals involved, and the mineral is not only in the Sahel states. They're in it's in the Congo, where without the minerals coming out of the Congo, your cell phone will cost you a whole lot of money, a whole lot more, or you wouldn't even have the cell phone.
That's right.
See, so Africa is very important. The minerals or the mineral resources coming out of Africa is very important to the industrial might of the colonial nations or the ex-colonial nations and even North America. So let's face it, if Africa is really that area where the world is depending on at this point in time for its industrial engine to keep working.
Okay.
Without Africa, well, there are minerals all over the place. But let's face it, the minerals coming out of Africa is very, very important to the economies of the industrialized nations of Europe and North America.
Okay, brother Senghor, Baba Mosi talked about he talked about the gold, and he talked about the cobalt and so forth for the cell phone. But Europe wouldn't even have electricity were it not for Africa. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's true. So I want to make it real plain, as El Hajj Malik Shabazz Malcolm X Omawale would say. I want to really make it really plain so people can really be clear. Nowhere in the world can survive without Africa. The fact of the matter is, even the human resources that were taken out of Africa, African people actually went out through the world and built North America and built other civil countries or nation states. Literally, the labor. In addition to that, as Baba Mosi said, there's so many minerals on the continent that everybody, including Russia, including China, including America, including everybody, has to have in some kind of form, fashion, or shape. Let's take us back. Africa is the cradle of civilization of all humankind. So I want to make it real plain. Not only gold, there are tremendous amount of resources that are on the continent that everybody needs. Now, we as African people are loving people. So with the proper methodology, it would have been possible, or it is still possible, for other people to gain some of those resources if they do it the proper way. However, we've been suffering for over 400 or 500 years from an imperialist attack by the European states. And what I mean by that, I'm talking about France, Belgium, Europe, and all of those countries aside from China and Russia. Because let's be very clear, even though, like Dr. Clark said, we really have no friends, the reality is we can do business with whoever we want to do business with. And Russia and China have been two of the large so-called countries that have not came in with the same kind of imperialist oppression of the people and the continent. Yet they support a lot of things that are going on in terms of people, the actual people taking charge of the continent. So I just want to be real clear on that point, because as a Garveyite, we can do business with whoever we want. And Baba Mosi made it profoundly clear that certain resources are coming from other places, from those who were less friendly to humanity of African people and to the continent. So I want to make it real plain and clear. There is nothing in Africa that is not needed by the rest of the world. Everything that's on the ground of Africa is needed throughout the world. And it's unfair that African people, who are the founders of humanity, because let's be very clear, there is no humanity. Garvey said we need to be science by excellence. There is no life without African people. Unfortunately, we've been oppressed and down-pressed for too long and don't gain the kind of self-reliance and control of our own natural resources on the continent. We're seeing that change today. And so I want to make it very clear that, as Tony Browder said yesterday, as they fall, we rise. As we rise, they fall.
Now I'm gonna add on to that. You said people want the mineral wealth and what's under the ground in Africa. Some people want the ground in Africa because the Chinese are moving there because they're running out of room. So they want the very ground. But Ibrahim Traore kicked out the French, and he's gotten off of the French franc, and they're bringing in and instituting their own currency. Now that's huge. I want both of you to take turns talking about that. Baba Mosi, we're going to start with you. What about this idea that they're getting off of the franc and they're instituting their own currency?
Well, that's a great idea for Africa, because Africa does need a currency that is recognized by the entire continent. Because what they're trading, they're using foreign currencies to trade right in Africa itself. Intra-Africa trade is done through some foreign currency, the dollar or the franc or something else like that. And so now the idea is coming out of Burkina Faso, from Traore, and from the brothers in the Sahel states, as a matter of fact. And they're even talking to Senegal and other I think it's Senegal and Chad dealing with this matter. So they need to have that currency, a currency that is workable throughout Africa. And so it's a very good idea that they can control their trade using their own currency, so that even the people out of the Europe and North America who are trading with them should recognize their currency and trade within their currency. Now, this is one of the things that Gaddafi was trying to do when he was overthrown. They said that's the last thing. They know that anytime you have to deal with trading without the U.S. dollar, that gets the U.S. frantic. They just can't deal with that. And the dollar is the trading currency in the world. It's recognized. Without the dollar being backed by the military force of the United States, the dollar is nothing. So when if these countries decide that we've got our gold, we've got our uranium, we've got all the minerals the mineral wealth that Europe and North America wants, now why should we have to be trading with their currency? They should be trading with our currency.
That's right.
So that's part of the thing that is good about them having their own currency. So I believe they should. And you had asked a question about the energy situation in let's say France. They can't operate without the uranium coming out of the Sahel states. France, most of the energy in France is from nuclear power, and they need that. And then when the uranium price is controlled by the people of the Sahel, definitely they're going to have to pay more. They've been controlling that and giving less. Now, France is lit up. Paris, you can see from the skies, it's bright. And what about the Sahel states? They're dark at night.
No, Baba Mosi, you said they're going to have to pay more. They're going to have to pay because they haven't been paying.
Well, yeah, of course. You're right about that.
Right.
They have not. They've been stealing for a very long time.
That's right. Now, Brother Senghor, I see you got your back up off the chair. You're at the edge of your seat. You want to chime in about this thing about the franc and the dollar?
Yeah, well, the fact of the matter is, as I said earlier, as we rise, they fall. As they fall, we rise. So when you start talking about monopoly capitalism, you're talking about the U.S. dollar becoming more devalued.
That's right.
And not controlling, as Baba Mosi said, controlling the economy and not just in the Sahel states, not just there, but even in Tanzania, they're starting to cut back on the use of the U.S. dollar and to go back to their own currency, which in turn, as Baba Mosi so clearly stated, it stresses their country. It stresses, and the U.S. dollar is falling. A lot of people don't realize it. A lot of places, and we're not just talking about because of BRICS, because that's a big problem for the U.S. is BRICS is making a move all around the world. But in addition to that, the African currencies are so important, and not so much to the nation states, but to the whole continent. Because as we say, we want a borderless continent, and we want one currency. Hopefully, we're moving in that direction, because when you have one currency that controls Africa, and when you have borderless states, you have more sovereignty to control the economies, to control industry, run out the multinational corporations. And let me give you one example. Brother Traore found out through extensive research that over $500 million or dollars in gold was going out the country, and Burkina Faso was getting 10 million. You hear what I'm saying?
Wow.
So that's a great example for people to understand. 500 million versus 10 million, and three of the major leaders of major multinational corporations were immediately arrested in Burkina Faso. Traoré arrested them. One was trying to get out and arrested them because they looked at all of their books and found out all of the crooked stuff. Even the fact that they're crooks already, don't be given no justice to where they're stealing from, if you hear what I'm saying. So it's almost like if you rob a bank, you don't give back no money to the people who had their money in the bank. You hear what I'm saying? So as the French have robbed Africa, they've given you the impression that they're giving you something, and then they force you to go to places like the World Bank and the IMF and different places like that to get loans to do other work, which means they've captured you into a monopoly. People know the game of Monopoly. They've captured you in a game of Monopoly where you got to use the U.S. currency, and then you also got to go through them, or you got to use the franc and you go through them. So in closing, when we use our own currency, that eliminates all of that. And, you know, of course, I'm not in charge, but if I was in charge, I wouldn't even sell them anything until they pay us reparations for all this stole way back yonder.
Okay.
So actually, like what's going on with Haiti, the French actually owe Haiti. You see? So
Sure.
what I'm saying is, before we can even negotiate and do business going forward, because we're loving people, they got to have some kind of reparatory justice to justify what they did to our continent prior to us and what they did to our people. So that's it in a nutshell. And let's don't even get into the artifacts that they've taken and put in their museums that charge people to go see. So all kinds of ways their currency has been in control of our destiny.
Okay, so all three of us here are Pan-Africanists. I also identify as Black nationalists. And for clarity, Pan-Africanism, and I said this in my book, is the social, political, and economic cooperation of African people worldwide. I'm seeing that Burkina Faso is starting to link with Mali and Niger. And I think you said Senegal is also getting on board. What does that do to impact the Pan-African consciousness of Black people or African people worldwide? Baba Mosi, I'll start with you on that one.
Well, it does a lot. It shows that coming together has an impact for self-reliance. Now, when they decide to come together and recognize their own currency, recognize the fact that they have power to make their own decisions, then the rest of the world, it's an example of what they can do. The rest of the world, you know, what places like the Caribbean, for instance, if you stay with the continent, the smaller nations on the continent who have, they have this fake democracy stuff that's going on in a lot of them. They have to depend on the dollar or somebody else's currency for them to, let's say, show that their economy is rising or growing. The growth of the economy is measured through the amount of dollars they accumulate, the amount of dollars that they earn through the trade or through the selling of their resources. And it's usually in the primary state. Let's say bauxite. Bauxite goes out in the primary state, and it goes to Canada and the United States, and even France. And what do? They make aluminum, and the products coming out of aluminum will be sold back to these states where the bauxite came from in a transferred state. In machinery, on other products, let's say for roofing, for instance, or for lightweight material to build cars. So cars may be, aluminum is part of what goes. Airplanes, different things are made out of aluminum. But those aluminum products are not being made in the state of Africa where the bauxite is coming from. So if they can get to the state where they can use their own resources to create products in the different stages, and have their own factories, have their own smelting plants, have their own ways of trading, shipping, and doing all that, have the control of the movement of their products, then that will be a different thing for the African people. And so I'm saying that with these states doing what they're doing right now, the Sahel states, this decision to create their own currency, to control their state of affairs in trade, as a state of affairs in what is in their own economy being used as currency, then they will have a pride in themselves, which is what I think is the aim of the leaders, to give people pride in that their currency, they can buy whatever they want across the border without having to have a US dollar or a French franc. That definitely is what is needed for the people. And so that I think is one of the benefits that they would have.
Okay, Brother Senghor, same question. What is the benefit and the impact as it relates to Pan-Africanism on the consciousness of Black people?
That's very important. First of all, let me identify myself as a universal Pan-African nationalist who understands the importance of Garveyism and the social construct of unification of all Africans. And I put that in those words because sometimes we get caught up in ideologies and don't understand. Garvey was clear, up you mighty race, we can accomplish what we will. And as Baba Mosi just said, as Pan-Africanists, what happens when you start to follow like Garvey and the UNIACL Rehabilitating Committee, you begin to see that we have to have control of our own education, our own health and wellness, our own industry building, etc. That's practical Pan-Africanism. But I want to also make it really clear, Sheikh Anta Diop said that we need to create an African federation. We were not at the Berlin Conference. When we call for a borderless Africa, we're talking about the United African States or the African United States, united as one Africa, which includes all Africans worldwide. I want to make that clear. as a universal Pan-African nationalist, we have to be very clear. We cannot get caught up in various different ideological differences. If you come to the table doing some work to help uplift Africans back to our traditional greatness, you deserve to have your work at the table, no matter how you come to it. However, we as Garveyite universal Pan-African nationalists are very clear that most people don't understand Pan-Africanism from a practical perspective. We know Henry Sylvester Williams, Mary Ann Shadd Cary. I like to call some of the sisters, so, you know, because a lot of times people kind of forget some of the sisters, but that's why I mentioned Mary Ann Shadd Cary, because a lot of times people forget about those kind of sisters who were at the table. But the fact of the matter is Pan-Africanism was being practiced even before the word was coined in 1900. All you got to do is look at the names of the various different churches, etc., and conventions that were held in the 18 and 1900s where they used the word African. So that was already was a connected. And my brother Chief Fode is absolutely clear that the first Pan-African movement took place with Sierra Leone, where Freetown was named. So you got to understand the history of Edward Wilmot Blyden and all those who came before the word even was coined as Pan-Africanism. But Henry Sylvester Williams and them were very clear the kind of Pan-Africanism we're talking about is reconnecting Africans outside of Africa with Africa, for sovereignty, not just independence. We're talking about sovereignty, which Baba Mosi made it so clear. Independence is one thing, but if you don't control the economy, you're not sovereign. If you don't, and you mentioned it earlier, if we don't control the land, we're not sovereign. So all African people, even if they're on the continent or outside of the continent, practicing the proper Pan-Africanism will take charge, and there will be a borderless Africa. You won't have to get a visa to go from one nation state to the other state. You'll have one currency, so you'll be able to properly trade with one another inside the continent, and every African outside the continent will help rise up, because the examples that's being set by the Sahel states is doable to get back to our traditional greatness. Now, let's be very clear. Way before Yurugu or oppression came into existence, we were one Africa. And if you go back to ancient times, you understand how we didn't have a border and we could move from one place to the other place. And that's why you have a lot of different Africans in different nation states now that some of their family was from the other side of the border. You hear what I'm saying? So it's important for us to bring the family back together again. And universal Pan-African nationalism is a way to do that. And that does not mean that you exclude other people who are not ideologically in conformance with yours. If they bring work to the table, that's why I mentioned a social construct. I ain't say socialism. I said a social construct, meaning we control education, we control social services, we control health and wellness, we control farming, we control everything in a social construct way, and we should be friendly to our brothers and sisters in Ubuntu and Mahat. That, some people call that socialism. I call it a social construct, race first for Africans first, because if we get our thing together first, then we can talk about how we can address the rest of the world. But that's important, I think.
Okay, so I'm glad you said that. I want to share this video, and I'm not going to play the whole video. I'm going to only just play a 3-minute portion that kind of goes into some of what Ibrahim Traore is doing in Burkina Faso. So after this, we're going to come back and we're going to talk about the video. Just stay with me for 3 minutes.
So did you guys know that there is a real life Black Panther superhero of Africa? And he's not from Marvel Comics. He's not from Hollywood. And he's not from Wakanda. He's from a small country in Africa named Burkina Faso. He is the leader of this country, and he is the youngest president in the entire world. And I'm telling you guys right now, there are going to be a lot of movies about this man's life, because he's not a fictional character. He is a real life superhero, which is the reason why he is the most popular president in the entire world right now. His name is Ibrahim Traoré. I made a video about him about 2 weeks ago, and now I'm thrilled to give you guys updates on what he is doing for the continent of Africa. Now, for those of you guys who don't know, Ibrahim, he took power in 2022 when he staged a coup d'etat to remove the former corrupt president, Paul Henry Damiba. Ever since, it's safe to say that Ibrahim Traoré, he has done more for the entire continent of Africa than any other leader in the last 50 years. And he's doing it at a rapid pace. He is turning his country, Burkina Faso, into the new Singapore. The country is undergoing a major transformation under President Ibrahim Traoré. Right now, he's constructing 55 hospitals to revolutionize healthcare. But this is just a part of a larger movement towards self-sufficiency and national empowerment.
Ami, ça gâte pas. Avec Burkina Faso là, y a pas sondé. S'il te plaît, regardez cet hôpital là. Hein? IB hôpital maintenant. C'est pas IP Cacao, IB hôpital. Ouais, moi-même je valide. Vous-même regardez. Ah, IB, Sabari.
Ibrahim Traoré, he just opened up 3 cement factories in Burkina Faso. And they are some of the most advanced cement factories in the world because they were designed by the best Chinese engineers in the world. Instead of buying materials from other countries, Ibrahim Traoré, he's building everything in-house. And with these cement factories, he's going to transform the entire country with massive infrastructure projects that are already ongoing right now. Right now, as we speak, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, he is building 50,000 homes for the homeless and the displaced in this country. 50,000, guys. And this is only the beginning of the project. He said this is just phase 1.
If this is how military ruling look like, we need military ruling in all African countries. If this is how dictatorship look like, we need dictatorship in all African countries. Yes.
This is a project by Captain Ibrahim Traoré to build 50,000 capacity houses for the displaced, for the homeless. That is your government providing accommodation for you. And we're not talking about regular accommodation. Ibrahim Traoré already has a template. He already has a blueprint, a greenprint into what he wants to achieve. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the template of what Ibrahim Traoré wants to turn those houses into.
So he's buying 50,000 homes for the homeless.
All right, so I'm going to stop there. Baba Mosi, I'm going to come to you first. 55 hospitals, cement factories, and 50,000 homes. What is your response to that when you see that?
Well, you know, I am not sure where the information is coming from, but I do know he has a lot in mind to do. Okay, even if it's 55 hospitals, they're doing that in a place where hospitals are hard to find. So they do need it. There is a need for 55 hospitals. The size of the hospitals, that doesn't matter because the country is wide. You need to have roads. You need the communications to go different places. They're going to have to put them in places where they have that. So it's a lot of work to put that together. The good thing about that is that he does not have to use U.S. dollars. The Chinese are doing that. The Chinese are giving him a loan, and that loan may be in Chinese currency, or it may be something that is equal to the amount of gold he can use for the Chinese currency. So gold is the currency here, and they can do that because now they own the gold mines. They can produce the gold. They have the gold, and China is not the only place that's going to. You have Russia is also getting involved in this, so they're doing things. And gold again is what is being used as currency. So they're in a good place when it comes to doing all this. And hopefully, if they have their currency established, and the rest of Africa or all the Sahel states recognize it and will use the currency, and that currency can be a currency for Africa, or the African nations will exchange using that currency. Great. So I'm all for what's being said here, and you know, like we were saying earlier, this is what the young people are hearing. They're saying that these models, these dreams, these things that they have in mind to do, and here's a young person who is doing this. He's not putting the money in his pocket. He's not building palaces for himself, and you know, I think that's real. And again, you know, he's a living iconic figure, and that is what is great, because young people are looking at somebody who they can emulate, and they hope all others in the continent can emulate to the betterment of the entire African continent.
Okay, brother Senghor, same question. What is your reaction to that? 55
So,
hospitals, cement factories. Go ahead.
what we're witnessing is Chika La Kabunga,
Listen.
the eye of the whirlwind. And what I mean by that, Garvey said we needed to be science par excellence. Once we have our sovereignty, once we have our self-determination and self-reliance, there's nothing we cannot do. What they got electric buses taking place. They got electric cars. They're dealing with solar energy. They're dealing with all kinds of science par excellence, sovereignty examples that the world can see. But I want to take us back again, man. There is nothing in the world that we have not been the core laborer or think tank with building, even in the European world. I mean, let's be very clear. There would be no European world without the labor of African people. And then there would be no computers without the ingenuity of science par excellence from African people. There would be no nothing without us. And that's what we have gotten away from. We have been hoodwinked away from our true Africanity and identity. There is nothing that we cannot do. There is nothing that we cannot create. There is nothing that we cannot survive the onslaught of. We've been licked, kicked, abused, drugged, robbed, killed, and everything has been done to us, but we're still here. So obviously, there is a divine blacktricity factor that is taking place. What they're doing in the Sahel states is critical for the world to see of how quickly it can be done. We're talking about 3-4 years, going on to 4 years at the most. And look at all that they have achieved, being sovereign, having control of their destiny. So the rest of the world need to wake up and understand when Garvey said, up you mighty race, you can accomplish what you will. When you have the willpower to get back to your traditional greatness, why should we settle for projects when we're the ones who built the pyramids?
Exactly. So now here is a B-roll of the fleet of buses that you mentioned, and I'm sure you was watching the launch of the EV coming out of the Sahel states. So I just wanted the world to see this is some of the work that Ibrahim Traore is engaged in. Burkina Faso and Mali are on board. You said, what was the other nation? I'm blanking on the name now.
Niger.
Yeah, Niger, and the other one, Senegal.
Yeah.
Well, not only Senegal, you have Chad, you have Senegal, you have quite a few other places. Let's don't sleep on our sister in Namibia, and like I told you, Tanzania. So the young people are rising up everywhere. Chief Fode say the young people in Sierra Leone, and we witnessed, what was it, April 30th? Was it April 30th or something like that? Or where Africans all around the world took to the streets in support of what we see happening in Burkina Faso, led by Ibrahim Traore. So young people all around the world are being motivated by that. And it's our hope as Garveyites that they will understand it's not about the individual, it is about the commitment of the spirit that comes through the individual. And Thomas Sankara, Kwame Nkrumah, Patrice Lumumba, we could go down the line. It's so many of the ancestors, and that's why I mentioned Chika La Kabunga, because the eye of the whirlwind is working, and we need to wake up and be a part of it. And as Brother Tony Browder say, we can't get so caught up in what they are doing to try to survive, because they will self-destruct, especially when we come out from that and raise up and do our own thing. Because we are not a minority, we are majority people, and all humanity comes from Africa, comes from Africans, the black man and woman.
There were some demonstrations that took place a month ago, maybe a little bit more than a month ago, all over the world. A lot of people came out. I pay attention to the BBC, and they're supposed to be the like objective version of the world news, although I know they're not that objective. I pay attention also to Democracy Now, which is coming out of here in New York. They're supposed to be a liberal version of the mainstream news, but I haven't seen either one of these entities spend a lot of time talking about Ibrahim Traore. I see the BBC every day, they touch on the conflict going on in Sudan, but nothing about what's going on in Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. So why the media blackout? Baba Mosi, I'm going to come to you first on that one. Why the media blackout on this story?
Well, the media is controlled by corporate entities that have no interest in seeing an Africa developing. They are quite content to show that Africa and Africans are in a confused state, that they're going nowhere. They're fighting each other. They're not building anything. And come on, that's it. Most of what they will show is always the undeveloped area. They don't show you some of the cities that are just as modern as some of the cities here in the United States or elsewhere. They don't show you that. What they want to show is that there is confusion. Confusion, of course, that precipitated through the works of these same nations. Not the African nations I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And these corporate entities who go into Africa, bribe people to cause confusion and fight among themselves. This is what they want to show.
Sure.
And then they will come in with their own forces to settle the matter. It's like what the French is doing in the informal colonies, right? They have these so-called rebels running around the country, and they come in with their troops and pretend that they're defending the nation state that they're in. They pretend that they're fighting against the rebels. And meanwhile, they're encouraging the rebels to have confusion to make it look like they're saving that state with their troops. It's the same thing they were doing in Burkina Faso and the Sahel, all the Sahels, Mali, Niger, all that. It's the same thing they were doing there until these guys say, well, we're here, we military people, and we're seeing what's going on. These people are conning us. They're a bunch of cons. And so it's best for them to leave because they're doing nothing. Yeah, so when you're talking about what's going on there, yes, they want to show confusion. They want to have confusion so that they could come in and continue to control the economic situation in Africa.
Yeah, it's problem, reaction, solution. Create the problem, get the people to react and say, hey, we have the solution.
Yes.
Brother Senghor, same question. Why the media blackout on this story?
Confusion and discontent will ever mark the path of man until we rise up and take charge. Media is very important. As Baba Mosi so clearly articulated, we can't depend on the so-called traditional media, which is controlled by the same enemy, or I like to say Yorugu. We can't expect them to, Gil Scott used to say the revolution won't be televised. Well, it won't be on their television, but it's in our television. Y'all hear me, what I'm saying? So we have to create a means of communication by any means necessary, like what we're doing right here now, to make it profoundly clear to everybody. Don't be so caught up in their propaganda, their media, because they're only going to feed you poison to take you in a direction away from really what's going on. And as the wake-up call is taking place, see, that's the thing that's very important, is that our ancestors are alive and they are coming back up through many of us. And the European world is in the fall, it's falling. Babylon is falling, but we're still holding it up because all skin folk ain't kinfolk. All Africans are not conscious enough to understand the power that we have when we go back into our ancestral intelligence, as I was saying, our AI, and use that to move forward. There's change taking place in the world, and we need to be a part of that change. Excuse my barking dogs because they get excited too when they hear my voice. But
Yes,
the
sir.
bottom line is we're living in some very, very important times. Sometimes we get so caught up in the negative that we become negative ourselves. We need to rise to the positive, and that's what that Blacktricity is. So we're living in a time where we're witnessing the change of the revert back to the traditional greatness of the great minds of Africa, and our ancestors are leading the charge. So in this 100-year centennial of El Hajj Malik El Shabazz, who was a perfect example of how we need to connect to Africa, Patrice Lumumba and him are celebrating 100 years. That ancestral energy is coming up. And like Garvey say, look for him in the whirlwind to be the real Marcus Garvey. And we as African people living are responsible to be connected to our ancestors. It's one movement taking place worldwide. And our young people feel it. All our African people need to provide for our young brothers and sisters so we can have millions of Traorés.
All right, brothers, that's our time. Our hour's up, so we have to let both of you go. Unfortunately, it's getting good though. It's
Well, you
getting
got
good.
too long-winded Garvey ice, brother.
That's good. That's good. We appreciate that content. We appreciate your insight and your input from both of you. There's more questions I wanted to get to. I wanted to get to the subject of Russia, but we're out of time now. So I would like to think that I can bring you both back on again in the near future, and we can continue the conversation as the situation continues to progress on the ground in Africa as well.
Well, we can see what's going on real quickly around the world, man. There was war games going on, and it's very important for us not to get caught in the cannon fodder. We need to fight our own war, and that is to liberate ourselves, our minds, our spirits, and our continent.
Okay. Baba Mosi, any closing words?
Well, I'd like to close with the motto of the UNIAACL, RC20, and that is one God, one aim, one destiny, and as we have added this in the situation on that right now, one Africa.
Like that. I like that. All right. So I want to thank you, brothers, again for coming on. I want to get you back on again soon so we can continue the conversation.
All right, my brother. Peace.
All right, bro. Peace. Thank you both.
Problem.
All right, peace.
Peace.
Baba Mosi, text me your email address again because